Hello, everyone. How's it going? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well because today we're talking about music and we're continuing our deep dive into Canadian pop punk and alt rock icons, Sum 41. Today we're looking at their 2016 album 13 Voices. Here we go. Here again, like I said, so released October 7th, 2016 on Hopeless Records, independent label. We'll get more into that. There's the inside there, CDs in the player. It was recorded from June 2014 to April 2016. So again, a big long gap, just like Screaming Bloody Murder. But I think this time it's more well warranted and it feels like it's taken effect in this recording process as well. So let's do a brief overview. So like I said, released on Hopeless Records. It's the first of two records released on that label. Um, this label is home to bands like All Time Low, Neck Deep, Avenged Sevenfold, Thrice, and The Used. So for the direction the band is going in and has been going in, I think it makes sense to me. I think they found a good home with Hopeless Records for this and their next release as well. So it's also their first release to feature a new drummer. So kind of founding drummer and band member Stevo has left the band now, replaced by Frank Zumo. And it's also the first album to feature as a member guitarist Tom Thacker. So even though he was considered a member of the band on the last album, he actually wasn't credited at all, despite being in the pictures, but this time he is. So now the band, we can see it again on the back there, officially a five-piece, and being a five-piece, in my opinion, works incredibly well for the band. Um, so it's also the first album. How are they a five-piece? It's the first album that features the longtime lead guitarist Dave Baksh, Brown Sound, who left in 2006, and he actually returned in 2015. So again, this album, during the recording and writing process, we're seeing band members leave, band members return. We're going to get into a bit more of a personal story as well. So there's a lot going on here. So on November 26, 2012, the band members revealed that they're going to take a break from touring in 2013 to begin recording a new album. So they start that April 18th, 2013. So that's starting from, 2013, the conception, to 2016. That's quite a long gap. But again, we got a lot of stuff going on here, right? So April 18th, 2013, Steve, the drummer, announced he was leaving the band via a post online. He didn't actually give a reason why until this last year when, the band announced they're breaking up. So a lot more interest and interviews happening around that. So he stated in an interview that was given last year on the radio, he says, quote, "I had a baby at home. I had a family at home. I had a new tiny person. And I think for me personally, I was burnt out from all the touring, all the partying. It got to the point where I wasn't happy anymore." So I think that's a big reason a lot of people leave bands, not that they're necessarily unhappy with the relationships with their fellow band members or the relationships they have with the music. You just get burned out. They want to try new things. They want to try not music. They want to have a family. They want to dedicate more time in their life to other things. And I think that's totally, totally acceptable. Um, and so in an interview on February 7th, 2014, Derek Whibley revealed that the band has possibly found a new drummer and they might be premiering new music, quote, soon. That soon would be a lie, but that's nice. That's hopeful. So the expected sixth album would have been the band's first, with Whibley and Cohn on bass as the two remaining members from the group's original lineup. So that was kind of what they were envisioning, would have been just them kind of as part of the original. But Bax returns in 2015. So it's actually that's his first album since Chuck 2004. Yeah, 2004 was when Chuck. So that's almost like 11 years, right? Which is really awesome. So the band, it's the first to feature Frank Zumo, making them a five-piece, like I said earlier, coming from alt-rock bands, Street Drum Corps and The Star, two bands I've never heard, haven't listened to them, but I can say on this album, the drumming fits really, really well. There's so much energy behind it, and it feels good, it feels right. So that's awesome. And then another reason, the more personally attached reason to why this album's recording process took so long. So on May 16th in 2014, Derek Whibley, so producer, founding member, guitarist, vocalist, posted an entry on his personal website explaining that he had liver and kidney failure due to excessive drinking. than partying. He explained that he has been in treatment in the hospital for over a month, and upon his release, he's going to be taking care of his health. So taking a step back from the grueling process of being in a band and concentrating on making himself whole again. So he's going to continue on the working on it a little bit, but from his home studio to do what he could. So he says, quote, I had to learn how to do everything again. My motor skills, learning how to play guitar again. I couldn't even walk at that time. It was really difficult. But at the same time, if I didn't have a record to make, I don't think I would have recovered as quickly. Writing music gave me a purpose. I had to get better. That really comes across on here. Obviously, he's no stranger to very personal and heartfelt lyrics. There's been tons of those songs, but this album is really, really touching. There's a lot of lyrics on here that you can tell his own experience that he's gone through, both personally in terms of his own health and him as a person, but also as a band, partings and comings and reunions and breaking apart. You get that on here, and I think that's really, really powerful. Um, so that's kind of the process. And then, so starting 2014, I would say, is when we get the more standard, as we want to call it, writing recording process. So let's get into a bit of the stats after the album, because we'll get into the album info proper later. So the album, it actually debuts number 22 on the US Billboard 200. Within the first week of sales, getting over 16,000 copies out. Impala, which is a European processual, awarded the album with a double gold award, so that's over 150 sold copies across Europe as well. So the fact that we're being open and vulnerable with personal struggle, that you hear that on the album. The fact that we're now a 5-piece with a returning member, have a lot of metal influence, you hear that on the album. We're on an independent label now. I think, to me, you hear that on the album. So let's get into it. So once again, Whibley takes the production helm, which I think is a good move. He's done it. He's got the experience to know how he wants the band to sound. And again, sonically, this is a great album. Sounds really good. There's actually a lot of keyboard on this album, like ballads. There's a couple ballads, and we'll get to that when we do the track by track. But even in the harder songs, there's like a pronounced keyboard, which is really cool. And I think that's just Derek. I thought it might be a session musician again, but I can't find anything online or in the liner notes that would detail a session musician. But Derek is credited as, is it just piano? Derek piano, yeah, just says piano, but there are keyboards on here. So my guess is that he's also doing the keyboards on that. This is a great album. I think the last batch of albums were going for that sort of early 2000s heavyish melodic alt rock, which is a genre I can appreciate that it exists, but it doesn't really scratch my back, doesn't really butter my egg rolls. Whereas this, there's a lot more metal influence. I'm not going to say, oh, if you're a fan of metal, check this out, you're going to be a fan. But I will say, if you're a fan of pop punk and you enjoy metal, check this out. I wouldn't say it's, metal and pop punk being mushed together, but those are sort of the two biggest influences. And I almost feel like now we're up there with those two. And then that sort of melodic alt rock is sort of underneath, which I'm cool with. I'm cool with that direction. I think lyrically as well, it's a lot more mature. And by mature, we've seen that grow through the last few albums, but I think it comes across really sincerely on here, whereas the other ones it felt maybe trying to get a little bit of a record label push to kind of match sort of that edgy feeling a lot of bands had around that time period. This one, it just comes across much more in a sincere way, which I really, really like. And I think sequencing wise too, this album feels the track order. It's really good. We're at 10 tracks long and it feels perfect length, and everything kind of fits exactly where it should. So now let's get into the track by track, because this is an album, again, it's, I would say, their best since Chuck. And I would say better than Chuck. Chuck had a lot of really cool hard songs, a lot of kind of I would say Chuck, the heavy songs are probably heavier than what you have on here mostly, but Chuck had a lot of ballads that I felt didn't really hit home. I think this is a really, really consistent album, and a much more enjoyable album. So you start with the track "A Murder of Crows," "You're All Dead to Me." Like they've been doing on their past few albums, it starts with a very atmospheric intro, but it builds into this kind of heavy guitar work. I really like it. There's like a false start or a false stop on this track, and then it goes into a really blazing guitar solo. I like that a lot. That's a good move. Um, Or no, sorry, that's on that track. This track, my notes were disorganized. The false starts on this track. God damn, I'm dead again, which I really like. This feels like a really pop punky song. Like the chorus, it's got a good tempo, good beat, good sing along chorus line. And then this is the one. There we go. It's got like a false stop, goes into a really, really good guitar solo. I like it a lot. Check that one out. Next track is Fake My Own Death. This was the lead single picked from the album. It addresses Whibley's personal struggle head on lyrically. It's one of the most powerful tracks on the album. It's really, really melodic, still pop punky, but a little more melodic, I think, to really put the focus on the lyrics for this track. The chorus in particular is sort of a rallying cry. I feel that really showcases Derek's vocal ability. I think as much as he's really tried to feature himself as a really good vocalist on the past few albums to middling effects. But here I think it works really well for the tracks where he's trying really hard to feature himself as a vocalist. And this is one of those tracks, I feel. Um, I think this is the first track on the album too where the drums stand out. At least that's the note I wrote down. I really noticed kind of the drumming is taking a bit more of a front seat on here, which I like. The next track is Breaking the Chain, which is another melodic number. Not quite as much of a fan of this one. It's catchy, it's got a really catchy chorus, but it's more of a melodic, not ballad. I guess it's kind of a ballad. Like a hard rock ballad. Hard ballad. Is that a thing? Maybe that's a thing. But it's actually successful. So speaking of the ballads, there's only two on this album. So I think kudos for dialing it back, Somebody One. But they both work really, really well. I feel like sometimes they've been a band where they're just throwing ballads at the wall to see what sticks. Maybe they're a hit, maybe they're not. But here, there's only two ballads on the album, and they both serve their purpose. They both really are very, very emotive, and they kind of pump you up for what's next. So kudos for that. Next, There Will Be Blood, which lyrically is kind of about owning up to the inner turmoil you have for following through on your own actions and activities. Um, it's got like a lot of really shifting tempos in this track, which is really, really cool. There's a lot of cool changes. The vocal delivery is really urgent. That's kind of a way I felt about it. It's not necessarily fast paced. I mean, it is. It's hard rock, but it's really more kind of anthemic, urgently anthemic, I'd say. It's a catchy song. Not really my bag. I think generally I like Sum 41. Again, when they're harder, kind of like this album cover would indicate, or when they're more catchy and pop punky. When they're doing that sort of middle of the ground thing, that's kind of where they lose me, and that's sort of one of these songs. But the title track, 13 Voices, probably my favorite track on the album that comes next. It's so good. Vocally on point, drumming on point, the chorus is on point, everything, the guitars, just a really, really great song. It feels worthy of being a title track. It's really, really good. I like it a lot. Next is War, which was picked as a single again, and it's the second ballad for this album. And I like it as much. I think I'd prefer the other ballad a bit more, but this is a good one as well. It does make me think because they picked this as a single, and I wonder, would we have heard more about this album if they decided to pick their heavier tracks as a single? Like the title track, 13 Voices. I get why they picked this one. Again, it touches on the turmoil that Derek and the rest of the band were going through at the time. And it's effective, but I'm like, maybe do people that aren't already going to pick this up, if they hear a ballad, is that what's going to sell them on the album? That's kind of a thought I had, but it is a really, really good track. Next up, oh yeah, I like this one a lot. God Save Us All, Death to Pop. Um, so it's sort of a song about, frustration with the state of the music industry. It's got that sort of punk attitude, punk feeling to it. It's got some really good lyrics. Again, that kind of sense of immediacy and urgency. And it just feels like, because we're sort of winding down from the album, two tracks left after this one. It's upbeat and energetic, but it is kind of signaling like, okay, we're getting ready. Good stuff is coming. Not one of those filler tracks, but a track that's sort of here to like, wet your palate for what's coming next. Because the next two songs are really, really good. So the Fall and Rise, I would say the Fall and Rise, as well as the title track, are probably my two favorite songs on here. It's got a really, really atmospheric, and it feels kind of like it starts almost like it's an introduction to what the closing track would be. Like they fit so well together, but it's a great track in its own right. Um, it feels like, so it has some sort of rap delivered lyrics, kind of, not really, but you almost have like echoes of some of their earlier works where they had those sort of rap almost delivery style lyrics. And part of me wonders, was that on purpose? Are they sort of making reference? Because a lot of the lyrics are talking about, reflecting on the career and how we got to this point. Was that on purpose, or did it just make sense delivery wise, song wise? It was just conceived that way without that thought put in. So I'm curious for that. Um, but it's really got a good kind of melody, and I just like that. In my mind, I'd like to think, because Derek is a fantastic songwriter, in my mind, that was on purpose. And then we get to the closing track, Twisted by Design. And I feel like it's a good closer. It almost feels like something that would have been more fitting for Screaming Bloody Murder. It's not a bad song, but I think the last track we talked about, Fall and Rise, is more apt to kind of represent this sort of point in their career. That Twisted by Design, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so maybe I would have flipped those two. But at the same time, like I said, Rise and Fall feels like an introduction to Twisted by Design. So we're getting that, snake eating its own tail, maybe. Um, but that's the last track on here, and it feels like a good closer as well, just not as strong as some of the other stuff on here. So with that, that's 10 tracks. A really successful album. The last few albums from them I was listening to and enjoying them and learning about it, researching it, and that was good. But musically, I was never really drawn to that sort of early 2000s, melodic hard rock, and those albums weren't really selling me for it. This, while I think there's still a little bit of that on here, I've started listening to Order and Decline, then the follow-up to this one, and I know I like that one a lot more. This is still a good spot. I think tracks like the title track 13 Voices, Goddamn I'm Dead Again, and Faking My Own or Fake My Own Death, and There Will Be Blood actually is really good too. I would check those out if you don't want to give this album a full listen, but it is worthwhile, especially if you were a fan of Chuck and you wanted to hear some of that hard stuff. There's a lot of really great blazing guitar solos on here, which is a lot of fun. And it makes me excited to continue down this path because I know I've already given a few listens to Order and Decline, the follow-up. I really like that one. I do really like the singles we've heard from Heaven Hell. We've had Rise Up, which is like the metal, the hard, the hell, and then we've had Landmines, and that's a really catchy number two for the pop punk side, the Heaven side. And that just makes me really, really excited to keep going on this project. I was getting a little burnt out, but this album, I'm into it. I'm into it. So let me know what you think if you check this out, or even just listen to the title track and Goddamn I'm Dead Again. Those are great songs. Give those a listen. That's Sum 41's sixth album, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.